Host Kevin Haugen.
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon. Welcome into today's community comment. As Wally mentioned, again, I'm your host, Kevin Haugen. It's my pleasure to welcome into our Daily Dodge TV studio our guest this afternoon on the program, Assembly District 37 Representative William Penterman. William, thank you so much for joining us here on Community Comment today.
Thank you for having me.
And the last time we had the opportunity to talk with the representative, it was about a month and a half ago, leading to the November election, doing the whole campaigning part of this. So, but now with that in the rearview mirror, how does it feel to be reelected? Now, I know that you represented, was it the 39th Assembly District or the 38th before, or was it, because it's now the 37th, so it's changed.
Yeah, so the numbers have all changed, and it's with redistricting and everything, things got kind of funky. But I currently represent the 37th Assembly District, and starting next year, I will represent the 38th Assembly District.
That's right.
So the district changed pretty significantly. So the new 38th Assembly District is essentially southern Dodge County and northern Jefferson County. When it was drawn by the governor, for whatever reason, he drew it kind of long, and narrow, and skinny. It starts up in Horicon and goes all the way down to the city of Jefferson.
Gotcha. So my mistake. So I guess currently, technically not incorrect, but currently 37th Assembly Districtman William Penterman, as you mentioned, soon to be Assembly District 38, which we had, as William mentioned, covers the southern portions of Dodge County and Columbia County as well in that grouping. So appreciate the representative for coming on here, Community Comment today, to talk about the upcoming session that's just a month away here, as we're going to highlight some new bills and new things that the representative hopes to bring up during that next session. But if you do have a question for our guest this afternoon on Community Comment, you can reach the program by calling 885-4446. Again, that number is 885-4446. Or you can text your questions into 887-9595. Again, that number is 887-9595 throughout our program today if you have any questions for our guest, again, which is Assembly District currently 37, soon to be 38, Representative William Penterman, again, here on Community Comment this afternoon. But William, before we dive into, I feel like the meat of our conversation today will be highlighting and discussing a lot of these bills that you are passionate about, want to bring up in this next session. So we'll get to those in just a minute. But before we dive into that, I just want to spend a few moments talking about a story that's really dominated the news headlines the last couple of days. I believe it was last week or just a couple of days ago, a Dane County judge essentially, and I won't get into the weeds too much of it because it could take quite a while to explain this in full detail, but essentially to summarize, the judge revoked or struck down certain sections. Yeah, struck down certain sections of Act 10, which was, if people recall back 12, 13 years ago, I believe 2011 this was the big time frame when this was taking place. Governor Scott Walker was looking to end collective bargaining agreements and with teachers and certain unions. So that was again a story over a decade ago that dominated the news headlines. Now that is looking to be changed and altered a little bit, and now that we have somebody with the Assembly, with the legislature in to talk with us today, I think this is a good time to just kind of talk about where things are at. I know this is going to be a process that's going to take many more months, potentially years to be litigated, but William, I'll hand the mic over to you. Just kind of where are we at right now in this process for our listeners who are just coming on to hearing about this, and what can they expect over the next couple of months or years as this continues on?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're correct. Act 10 was one of the landmark pieces of legislation from 2011, signed by then Governor Scott Walker. Did a number of things, but largely ended collective bargaining for most public employees, really weakened the power of unions, particularly teachers' unions here in Wisconsin. At the time, we were looking at over a $3 billion state deficit, so they were really looking for as many cost-cutting measures as possible. Since then, Act 10 has been litigated, it's been sued, it's been upheld every time, and now, essentially because we have a new makeup on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, the political landscape looks different. So none of the facts regarding Act 10 or any of the policy has changed. The only thing that changed now is that there was a very activist judge from Dane County who, by the way, also signed the Recall Walker petition. So we kind of knew where his political stance was, which, as a judge, you're supposed to remain politically neutral to the best of your ability. And basically, the judge decided that, hey, things are different now, so we're gonna say that Act 10 is going to be overturned. So that is a developing story, and in the legislature, we are going to be appealing that. So it is going to take time. Nothing changes immediately, but the odds that this goes before the Wisconsin Supreme Court in the end eventually are actually pretty likely, I would say.
Yeah, and I know that how the makeup of the Supreme Court, what that looks like here coming up here at the April election, not too far away. I know that'll really determine kind of what happens with this process. So again, we'll be following this, I'm sure, for the next couple of months at least. Who knows, years. This could be out before any sort of changes are made official. But just wanted to spend a few moments there just kind of recapping where things are at. I appreciate the representative for spending a few moments doing that. But let's pivot here and focus in on this next upcoming legislative session that kicks off here on January 6th. All the new members come in, get sworn in. Have committee assignments been doled out yet, or is that kind of when that kicks off as well, when everybody comes in?
Yeah, so committee assignments should be coming out in the coming weeks. So we don't know for sure what committees are going to be are going to be on yet. So stay tuned.
TBD on that one. So I know that there's certain that they're formulating the makeup of the Joint Finance Committee. There's been some breaking news in that here, I believe, in the last couple of hours today. Just some of the individuals. I could not name them off the top of my head, so I will not even attempt to go through that list. But I know that information is available online if you want to check that out. I know that that's a really key committee that really spends a lot of time crafting the biannual budget and putting together a lot of the finances for the state of Wisconsin. So it's an important committee to keep an eye on, and we'll see again the rest of those important committees start to take shape here in the next couple of weeks. And as that new session begins, obviously this is the opportunity for representatives and members of the state assembly to come forward and introduce their own legislation, their own bills, to work that way through the process and get approved and eventually hopefully signed by the governor. And Representative, I know that there's a couple of key bills that you're hoping to bring forth in this next session. So again, I hand the mic over to you, and just if you don't mind going through some of those bills you're hoping to introduce.
Sure, thank you. So there's a few that I guess we're recycling from last session that didn't quite make it through across the finish line. The first one, so I'm a part-time substitute teacher. I'm not in the classroom today, but education is super, super important. And we want really good teachers who are passionate about what they do to be in our classroom, leading our kids, setting them up for success. But unfortunately, one of the problems we're running into is a lot of teachers, after they become teachers and enter the profession, they don't stay teachers very long. And there's a lot of surveys about why that is, and there's a few factors. But one of the most common ones we're hearing is that they just weren't adequately prepared for good classroom management. That, you have to have the academics, credentials, to know what you're teaching, but then also to manage a classroom as well. A classroom of 20, 25 kids, that's no easy task. It's a skill, and it has to be honed in on, and we're always improving. But so one of the bills I introduced last session is we call it the 2+2 model for teacher pathway, and other states have done it, so it's been tried and tested, and we've seen a lot of success. So the traditional way we do it is aspiring teachers spend 4 years at college or university studying the academics, and then they go on to student teach for a semester. But what the 2+2 model does is you spend 2 years at college or at your university learning all the academics and a lot of the theory, et cetera, and taking your gen eds. But then you spend 2 years after that in the classroom, basically student teaching under the mentorship of a current teacher and learning that extremely valuable classroom management that is so important. At the end of the day, I think this would really set our future teachers up for better success, so that when they're in the classroom of their own, after they've graduated, day one, they're proficient in classroom management. They know how to run it, and there's essentially not going to be any surprises.
And as somebody who has teachers in my own family and know firsthand the amount of work that goes into managing a classroom and preparing even just for a single day, is the amount of work that is involved is quite extensive. So having that preparation, I'm sure, will play a huge role in keeping the numbers and staff, because obviously we've heard a lot, and it's not any different in any other working sector here throughout the state of Wisconsin, but we hear, and it's a big one just because of how important education is in teaching the upcoming generations important life skills and important skills just in general. But keeping good teachers, qualified teachers in that profession, not let them get burnt out. Is there? Obviously, the bill that you were just talking about, William, is about getting people prepared. It's for people who already decided, all right, I want to be a teacher. I want to go into this profession. Maybe just as one quick additional question, do you feel like there needs to be more done to incentivize? Obviously, we know teachers, there's a good payout once you retire through the state funds and stuff. But is there more that needs to be done, whether it be raising the pay or providing more support for teachers to keep them in that profession, so there isn't that burnout and that talent drain that we've been seeing over the last couple of years?
Yeah. So one of the most important things that it comes down to local individual school districts as well is supporting their own teachers and providing them mentorship and having their backs, because for a variety of reasons, students act out. Students sometimes have a bad day, or sometimes there's behavioral issues, mental health issues, whatever, and it can be exhausting for the teachers to constantly, day after day, deal with some of the same problems, and they really need the support of the entire team there at the school. Everyone's working together, to make sure our kids are all on track. So it's that good team effort. Everyone doing their part. Certainly, we want to pay teachers well. That's a factor of the equation, certainly, but it's not the only factor. Climate and atmosphere and culture in a school are super, super important as well.
We're talking with Assembly District 38 Representative William Penterman here on Community Comment this afternoon. We're highlighting some important legislation hoping to be introduced and also reintroduced, as he just mentioned, that these are some from previous sessions that didn't get to the finish line. So hopefully this upcoming session, those can see them get to that point and get signed into law. William, what else are you looking to bring up in this next session?
Yeah, so we also have a pretty significant budget surplus. So it stands roughly around $4 billion. And that's a good chunk of change. But just adding a little context to the number, it's important to keep in mind that the budget is a 2-year budget. So we call it the biennial budget. And last session, the biennial budget was just shy of $100 billion. So that's also a significant amount of money. So it's the $4 billion surplus we are in a good fiscal position right now, but it's not an endless supply of money. That it's not that we can't be Oprah with Oprah and you get money, because then it's spent very quickly. Yeah. We also have to be very careful and not create a bunch of ongoing programs as well, because it's one-time money. There's $4 billion available now. That doesn't mean it's going to be available in 2 years, in 4 years, and 6 years. So what are some good one-time investments we can do? In the past budget cycle, one of the things that we did, it's called the ARIP program, the Agricultural Road Improvement Program, that specifically was one-time money that was allocated to improve roads, particularly in rural areas that were used primarily in the ag community, because the agriculture makes up just such a huge important part of our economy here in Wisconsin, that it was a good investment in a lot of our agricultural roads. There was a lot more applicants and a lot more money that was applied for than was available. So I think that'd be a good use of one-time money, as well as continuing to invest in our local roads as well. Plus, why is the reason that we have a surplus? And essentially, the reason is that the people of Wisconsin have overpaid. So I'm very, very strongly of the mind that we need to give it back to the people who overpaid. Now, how do you do that? One of the best ways is to essentially have is to lower our income tax, particularly for the working class, for retirees, for folks who have overpaid. So that's we tried a few creative ways last session to get that done. Unfortunately, most of it was vetoed by the governor, so we weren't able to implement good tax relief. But it's something that we're definitely going to be trying again this upcoming legislative session.
If you have a question for State Representative William Penterman, one more time, the phone numbers to get into the program today, 885-4446 if you want to call in. You can also text 887-9595 if you have a question, again, for our guest on Community Comment today. Assembly District, currently 37, will be so essentially, is that when the new session begins, that all those numbers and everything that'll officially transfer over,
Yes.
and whatever desk nameplates you have that say 37, those have been changed now to 38. That's all when that'll officially take over and change.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
So like I tell folks, the number isn't as important. It's more of just
The maps.
specifically, designating this is your district number.
Yeah.
Some people who run for office put the number on their yard signs or whatever, and that's fine. But your specific geographic location in the municipalities that you represent is certainly what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And, William, you spent a few moments just talking about how important the agricultural community is here in the state of Wisconsin. I know that you mentioned before we got on air today that there's another bill that you want to bring up that deals with farmland here in the state of Wisconsin. What does that bill entail?
Yeah, so we're seeing a disturbing trend around the country and as well in Wisconsin that we're seeing China buying a lot of farmland here in the state, and I think that's inappropriate. China is one of our adversaries. That we're not specifically, we're not in a military combat with them or anything, but we're definitely we are keeping them on the radar as we are competing with them in the global markets and whatnot. And what China's doing is they're buying a lot of farmland here in the United States and as well as in Wisconsin. I don't have the exact number, but it's a number of tens of thousands of acres that they already own, and it looks like they want to continue to buy more. It seems inappropriate, and it doesn't seem right that China is buying up all this farmland. It seems like a direct conflict of interest for our national security, our state security. So one of the bills that I'm going to be bringing forward would be prohibiting foreign adversaries from purchasing farmland here in Wisconsin. We're not saying that that no foreign individuals can own farmland, but specifically foreign adversaries, and it's defined by the State Department. What is a foreign adversary? Because that changes over time as well. We've got great partners in the ag community. We've got investments from other countries, from Ireland, from Japan. In my district, there's a huge new expansion of Kikkoman. They make soy sauce and other really delicious sauces. And it's a great investment, great partnership with Jefferson County and with Wisconsin. So, Wisconsin is open for business, but when it comes to foreign adversaries purchasing farmland, that's just inappropriate.
Yeah, and that was, you kind of touched on essentially what one of my follow-up questions was going to be. Essentially, was what classifies a foreign adversary. Obviously, as you mentioned, those things can change at the drop of a hat. One country that's labeled that today, you could look 20, 30 years down the road, and that could not be the case. So essentially, how it sounds like this bill will be structured is essentially it'll be a fluid thing that whoever you say I'm sorry, who's essentially
the State Department.
The State Department,
so above
okay.
my pay grade.
Above a lot of our pay grades, make those determinations. So they determine then who is a foreign adversary, and then this bill will then, whoever that agency list, essentially that will then be updated or reflected in this potential bill.
Correct. Yep.
Gotcha. And then is it something that if a foreign adversary is looking to purchase land, is it just all communications cease to? Obviously, sometimes people will do their businesses without going through state agencies and figure those plans like that. Is it something that obviously before the dotted line is signed and things like that? Do those things get brought up? And I'm just curious to know how that process works when you hear about something and stepping in and preventing a deal from happening.
Yep. So there's many ways which buying house, buying land
Sure.
is recorded and well documented. That this would merely would not allow individuals who are one of our foreign adversaries, particularly China, so that it's and I want to be very clear, we're not restricting Chinese Americans from owning farmland or becoming entrepreneurs, whatnot. That's not the point. The point is, China is run by a communist government, and they have certain goals and aspirations and other things that they don't always broadcast loud and clearly. Some things they do. They're literally building islands out in the Pacific. It's fascinating that some of their strategies are fascinating. But allowing them to basically buy farmland from within here in the United States, and particularly very close to home in Wisconsin, that's got to stop.
Yeah. Again, we're chatting with Assembly District 38 Representative William Penterman here on Community Comment today. Before we wrap up our conversation here with our guest here today, is there any other bills, any other things that we want to note or highlight here that you are hoping to reintroduce, get across the finish line here in this next session?
Yeah, so there's another one I want to touch on real quickly while we still have some time, and that is combating organized retail theft. So it's something we've seen in other states, particularly California, where there's these smash and grab instances where individuals are just entering places. Let me back up. Not just individuals, but it's organized. There's a group or a gang or whatnot, and they come in and they know what they're doing, and they basically do it for a living. Is they just go to stores and they rob them, and that's not good for businesses. It's not good for the economy, and it's clearly already against the law. But what my bill would do would basically be grouping together a lot of these smash and grab instances so that they can be prosecuted. Not just individually as, okay, well, you robbed the Target, you robbed the Quick Trip, you robbed Applebee's or whatever, but you could group those together when prosecuting those. So it's a way to improve efficiency and make sure that we are seriously addressing an issue that is just completely inappropriate and unfortunately seems to be on the rise.
Yeah, and I'm sure this is something that state prosecutors could get behind and support, because it all intents and purposes streamlines that prosecution process of not having to litigate and go through the court process of initials, arraignments, prelims, sentencing, all those steps in multiple different cases for one individual who may have committed those crimes at multiple different stores. You can, as you mentioned, group all those things together, litigate that as one case, potentially get resolutions done in a large amount of infractions in one couple of court hearings that don't have to be spread across multiple different dates and multiple months. It sounds like that's is that essentially also kind of a goal of this, is to help those state prosecutors be able to do their job essentially and then prosecute these cases and get them done so they can cross them off the books.
Absolutely.
And I know that for a big story, it's not much of a big story now, but it was maybe a year and a half ago, was essentially just the talent drain. Also, we talked about teachers a little bit earlier, but also the talent drain with the state prosecution office with the assistant DAs and all those positions. So I'm sure that any sort of workload that can be taken off their shoulders, they will fully support and get behind. And so that is one that you're looking at introducing. Now, before we wrap up here today, maybe real quickly, Representative, and maybe this is something that we can't go through quickly, so I apologize if I'm putting you on the spot. For those who aren't maybe that familiar, and I'm part of that group. What does this process look like when you introduce a bill? What's the next steps then to then get those things eventually signed into law?
Yeah. So right now, there's not a. If you go to the Capitol, it looks like nothing's happening. But right now, a lot of the research and the design and the conversations are going on behind the scenes for some of the legislation we've talked about here today, and then some. We're meeting with other community leaders. What are some of the problems that we need to address? So then, when the new session begins in January, bills can be introduced. They'll be referred to committee. If they pass committee, they'll go out to the floor and then off to the governor's desk. And then also the same process through the Senate before the governor's desk.
Fantastic. Again, I want to thank our guest here on Community Comment today, Assembly District 38 Representative William Penterman, for taking some of his afternoon to come in to chat with us here again on Community Comment. William, thank you again so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
And that will do it for today's Community Comment.